Okay everyone, welcome back. I'm going to start this video part 2 right now. In part 1 I really just ran out of steam, so sorry about that. For this one it's going to be a little bit faster, I hope. We'll see how it goes. But I'm going to try to play with a little more depth, a teeny tiny bit of thinners, and a little more loading. Whoops. Just to give it a little more chunk. And yeah, that's not bad. So the difference between the beginning phase of doing a painting where we were just blocking everything in, and I'm quoting my mentor a bunch probably about, you know, 3 looks, 2 thinks, 1 stroke, and then this phase is that, well, it's kind of just like taking those big ideas of finding the local color wherever they are, and then just applying those to a more local scale, like to a smaller scale. And so the nice thing about it is there's not any secret sauce to painting so much as it is you are doing brushwork that is expressive, and you're doing you're just sort of like breaking apart these different areas of the painting. So like, for example, let's go ahead and take this area, which right now is just a lot of chunky brush strokes, which some people might say, gosh, that looks cool, don't ruin it. And I feel you, but I'm going to try and tidy it up a little bit without losing the freshness. And I think that's really the whole goal of what we're going to try to do right now, is you want to paint with the same spirit that you had in the beginning, but you want to probably just give it a little bit more refinement. It's sort of like, I guess, kind of like anything, you kind of start with passion, right? And then you finish with dedication, and you finish with a little refinement. For me, whenever I do like home building projects, for example, or oh, I want to build this, or I want to try that, it always starts with this like grand vision, this like exuberance, this running to the hardware store, this like, you know, putting everything together. The build up is super fun, but then I usually have to hire someone to do the trim work, because I'm kind of like, I'm done now, you know. For me, the thing that's fun about it is not the final finishing detail work. That's never been the thing for me that makes me interested in anything really. So I think we all have different strengths, right? So for you, you might be good at that, just that passionate dedication to the little problems being resolved in the end or whatever. But for me, it's just the opposite. My wife, by contrast, is very good at the things that I'm not good at. She's the detail-oriented person that's always reminding me to not start a new project until the first one is finished. And you know, that's good. That's why we're a good fit for each other, and one of the many reasons. But with a painting in this stage, I think some of you might find this is the fun part. Some of you might find it's the kind of the boring part. And if you're like me, where you kind of like are running with so many ideas in your head that you will tire out of an idea if you don't paint it quickly, it's really, I guess my recommendation would be to learn to paint fast, so that you don't burn out before the painting is done. And I have some questions about this, because like, I think for digital painting, the initial phase is way faster. The color mixing is easy, you know, is like grab and go, and then you can make a lot of modifications really quickly to your drawing. But once that's in and your drawing is pretty accurate and stuff, then sometimes I feel like the digital painting slows down a little bit. And I think it's because the refinement process can be, you have so much control. you can expand and contract the canvas. You can completely upend your composition and try something totally new halfway through. You just have so much freedom that I think sometimes it's a little hard to know where to stop. And with with traditional, you're not as free, and so you don't have that latitude. So it's just a lower ceiling with stuff you can do. So I think the one thing you got to be careful of with digital is you got to be careful that you're not getting too fancy with it. So one thing I want to do is start getting a little bit different brushwork in here. And up to this point, I've really just been using the oil brush and this palette knife, and I think those two are probably sufficient to make a nice, really nice painting. And you don't really need to ever use real fancy tools to get a nice painting out of Art Rage. But since we can, I would like to use some of these presets. I'm just going to use the artistic. Now this is the custom brush, and the custom brush has some built-in brushes that are really nice. So let me just go through a few of them. Here's the canvas brush. Look at that. Kind of looks like canvas. And it plays really nicely with the oil brush and really nicely with the palette knife. What I like about it is it gives a little bit of like a softer blending. And here's something I would like to try. Let's see. Let's go in here into the brush designer, and we can change the spacing. Just close that down a little bit. I'm having a hard time grabbing that. There we go. Let's go down to like 10 or 9. And then when we brush in, it's going to be just a little bit more opaque. So we're going to brush that in and just kind of soften and use the this Canvas 2 preset as like a blending tool, pretty much. It's just like wet on wet painting basically, and since it has that nice canvas texture, it's going to echo that canvas texture below that comes from the actual surface, and it gives you a nice look. You know, I've done enough studies in my life where I'm happy when it, you know, just to leave things like really rough, but sometimes, I don't know, sometimes I want it to have a little bit more refinement, and so we're going to go for that for this second half of today's painting. And let's see, maybe maybe I can go a little faster. I'm just going to challenge myself to maybe if the talking doesn't make as much sense, I'll try to kind of keep the talking slower but do the painting more quickly. So what I'm going to try to do now is find some of the values that maybe I didn't quite get to put together as well. Like there's always a little bit of too much simplicity in that initial pass that you miss some of the value transitions, you miss some of the stuff that makes it really work. And here's a kind of an interesting example of that. You have this kind of darker ground that there's some highlights on top of. And my initial pass just was a pretty unsatisfactory example of what was going on. So I'm going to put that darker value back down as a ground, and then watch this. We can get something like this airbrush splatter, and then just grab the white highlight that's in here. Did I get it? Yeah, I think I got it. And you could try some different. Those aren't working super well. Let's try this, kind of small. Yeah, see, something like that. So this is the paint splatter in solid form, and you could try, you know, kind of just, it looks a lot like spray paint, and it looks a little bit like that glitter kind of pop that's at that part of the mask. And it's part of what makes this picture really work is that like kind of star shine, glitzy, glamoury, kind of over the top thing. So I really like this tool for that. And it might be a bit early actually to be putting this kind of detail in. Usually I wouldn't, even let myself go there until later in the painting. But I think for this piece, and I don't know, there's a balance. Like right now I'm a little tired after another long day of stuff, so you have to kind of keep your own interest. I think when you're a beginner, you want to definitely follow the rules, like find some best practices and really stick to it, so you can kind of hammer down what those sort of like the idea of training your instinct. So you got to kind of train your instinct so you know what to do every time you pick up a brush, every time you're just getting into something, know what to do, so that when things get hard, you can almost turn your brain off and you just know exactly where you're headed. And but I think once you get a little bit more familiar, you can take a bit of liberty with the process, and maybe at your own peril sometimes, but I think you kind of learn your limits, and you gotta do it responsibly. But the refining phase is it's pretty fun. It's not the most there's some parts of it that are not the most stimulating. You're kind of just like, it's a little bit grindy in some spots because you're just kind of polishing everything. But as we go, there's a lot of fun to be had, and there's a lot of tools to explore. So right now we've tried the Canvas 2 brush. Here's the Canvas 1. It's just like a big version of that, and then the Canvas 4 is like a tight version of it. So that one's a good one too. It's gonna have more of like a micro blur to it. But I hope you guys, as you are at home and safe and painting and trying to do some creative work, I wanted to just offer up a little story of someone doing just that. So I had a student named Ashley who messaged me today and sent me a photo and said, hey, just wanted to thank you for teaching me Art Rage. And she was in a digital drawing and painting class, and that course is really fun because all we do is paint in Art Rage and Photoshop and Procreate, and we kind of just do a little bit of everything. And I remember she really loved Art Rage. She almost wouldn't use anything else. And when that happens, and someone really finds their groove, there's really very little reason to interrupt that. I mean, there are you always want people to kind of get a basic competency with all the different softwares for the course, but like once that's achieved, just get out of the way and let people use what they're comfortable with. So I remember she just painted an Art Rage all the time. And when she sent me that message today, she sent a photo of the painting she was working on, which was, of course, done in Art Rage, and it looks like it was done on the iPad. So that's something that we can talk about, is that Art Rage has a great desktop app. It's really full featured, a lot of custom brushes and a lot of custom settings. That, along with the fact that there's a really high limit to the brush size, so you can paint it, and the brush size can be up to like 500%. That gives you a lot of flexibility to do some very professional stuff, because you can create these huge canvases to work on, so that you can make big brush strokes, and you can have this high-res image that you can send to publishers, or if you can send to clients, or you can send to print or whatever. But when you're working on the mobile version, you don't have as much flexibility with brush size, canvas size, and a lot of the features. So with custom brushes and stuff. Although the mobile app is very full featured and amazing, and I love it, especially on the iPad. If you have an iPad Pro, for example, especially an iPad Pro, that's what I have. If you have one of those, you've got to get Art Rage on it, because just for example, today I was we're like in the quarantine, and I'm watching if you're watching this video 5 years from now, this video is made during the 2020 quarantine, the pandemic, and so if you're if you're like me, you know, people get bored of doing stuff at the house. Everybody's at the house for days and days and days, and they want to do things. And a lot of times we end up doing like a family movie every day. And, you know, we do walks and we do all kinds of stuff together, but a family movie is kind of part of the routine right now. And I like movies, but I don't love movies. You know, I love science fiction movies, but I don't just have like a default innate, you know, like instinctive hunger to watch movies. So I prefer to be doing something while I'm watching a movie, and that something is painting. You know, I don't want to be like on my phone just looking at stuff. I want to be painting. So you know, just like in Ashley's message, and just like me today, having a hobby like Art Rage, or, you know, or whatever your platform is but you know, I would suggest getting into Art Rage. It gives you something wonderful to do, and that was her comment. She said, "Thank you for giving me something interesting to do while I'm in lockdown." And that was really a strange coincidence, because that was why I'm doing these videos, is because I just saw a need. You know, everybody's trying to find ways to keep themselves stimulated and activated and engaged with stuff. So when I got that message, I thought, oh, this is perfect. You know, this is exactly what I'm thinking about right now. And I'm really, really happy for her, and her work was looking super cool. So Ashley, if you were out there, keep it up. You were awesome. And then another thing that was really cool today is that I got an email from someone who was interested in one of my paintings on Daily Paintworks, and they actually I think they found my work through my YouTube videos, which was also surprising. You know, just how, you know, people get online and start kind of keeping track and finding what you're doing. And this artist was struggling with, you know, maybe an older desktop or older laptop, and it wasn't, you know, running Art Rage the way they wanted. They weren't comfortable drawing with the Wacom tablet instead of drawing directly on the screen. They were used to drawing in a program called Adobe Fresco on their iPad Pro, and my recommendation was for them to pick up Art Rage on the iPad, because I think that, you know, if you're kind of new to it all, and you're more comfortable drawing directly on the screen or directly on the imagery, instead of kind of in the abstract kind of drawing on a plastic tablet that you don't get to see your hand moving across the surface that is receiving the drawing and stuff, then definitely do whatever is working for you. Like, there's no wrong way. If you have the mobile version, you have a great painting software. You can do some beautiful professional stuff with the mobile version. Like I said earlier, the only real difference is you kind of have to limit your canvas size, at least in your creation, right? And if I remember right, the mobile version still has something called the script recording, which lets you record your whole painting as script. So basically it records each brushstroke as a separate data point, and then you can export that and then replay the data points in sequence as a sort of live repaint by the software of your exact, it's like makes a clone of your art basically. But what's super cool is you could then take that script and you could export the file to your desktop, and you can have the desktop repaint it at a higher resolution, which is a really cool way to get around this resolution limitation of the iPad, or of, you know, not of the iPad itself, but of the app on the iPad. So there are some cool ways that the desktop and the mobile version can work together. So that's something that I don't think I've really ever talked about on here, but I was thinking about doing a demo of it because of the message I got today. Made me think, well, it's something that I do, and I haven't never talked about it, is that you can draw, paint, whatever on the couch, and then export in a number of different ways, not just with the script, but you can export the actual file and then just pick up where you left off on mobile, and then on the desktop. So you can, it just works seamlessly pretty much. Now one day I'm sure they're going to have it be like cloud save, and you can work from the direct from the iPad to the desktop with never even having to like do any kind of saving. It just is all automated, and that's I'm sure what's going to happen at some point. But for now, it's a pretty good solution, and it's just very little file management to make it work. So I would give that a shot. Another thing that came from that exploration today on the couch was I never really do like how to draw water or how to paint eyes, or things like that kind of videos. Like what I really focus on is instead just these principles of looking. Like, for example, here's a good example of the way I look at it. If I look at the lip, there's a vertical line here, right? There's a horizontal line here. If I have a virtual grid superimposed across the image, is this line more vertical or more horizontal? Well, I feel like it's more vertical, right? And then I can kind of, like in my head, I can feel like the space of a little triangle between that vertical grid line and that horizontal grid line that would create like a little triangle between the skin here of the cheek and then the lip. And so then I can take that and map that triangle out over here, making sure I have the right proportion. And then I can look for how flat this part of the lip is, or I can look for how angled this is, and then I can look for these little angles as I just try to find the shapes of these colors that are kind of walking. I can walk around the whole painting looking for these little shapes of light and dark. And what's super cool about that is then you don't really need to have a tutorial for eyes and nose and mouth and cheeks and blending and all that stuff, because you're just shape recording, right? You're just bam, find the shape. You're like, oh, look at that, there's like a little C-shaped highlight here, bam, bam, there's that little C-shaped highlight. And then you go, oh, okay, look at, there's a little V-shaped gold thing here, right? Boom, boom, and you knock it in. And that's kind of painting, right? Is you're just shape finding. And if you're doing that well, you don't really need any specific tutorials of like, well, here's how to draw a tree, or here's how to draw reflections or whatever. But that said, even though I'm like firmly in that camp of you don't need that, you just need to focus on fundamentals, which is, it's not about like some secret technique. It's about just learning to look, learning to see shapes, learning to record value and shape, and that's it, right? But while I do believe that, I think that when it comes to stylization, when it comes to tool usage, sometimes the little how-tos are actually kind of fun. And you can get tips from the ones that are based on anatomy, or you can get tips from ones that are based really strongly on materials and techniques, so like, oh, I'm painting in gouache. Well, here's what I do for gouache setup. And that's not really a matter of like looking at shapes and seeing colors. That's a matter of like, how does the tool work? And how do you best get results with the tool? Or what would be a good alternative to blending with the palette knife, right? So you can blend with the palette knife, but you can also blend with the tool that I was just using, right? So I was using the custom brush tool, using the paint splatter. So I can actually, watch this, I can actually blend with that. See how it makes kind of a nice soft edge? If I don't want to go in with palette knife or the oil brush and really knock that down, I just want to be done with it, I can take this and just kind of blend in some highlights. It's easy. So things like that, like kind of hints and tips and tricks, I think that, plus just like reiterating constantly the necessity of looking closely, looking for simplification, talking a little bit about theory, but I think that's really the key to it. When we have a new painter and you're a new artist and you're trying to tackle this stuff and you want to find, how do I make my paintings look loose and expressive and have brushwork and all this kind of stuff? Well, how do you do that? Well, I think it's all about comfort. First, you just want to get those fundamentals super cozy inside your brain so that you know no matter what subject you're painting, you kind of have a method. You just have a way of going after it. And then you can also be more free with it. I think of it a lot like throwing a baseball or throwing a softball, or like for me it was football. I was more of a footballer and then actually a soccer player. But if it came to throwing, I was probably throwing a football a little bit. And yeah, I never really, if I was throwing a ball to a friend, I never had to think like, okay, he's standing what, 15, 20 yards away. Okay, so then I need to, I need to position my feet like so, and I didn't have to think about that stuff at all. I just threw it to him. And I threw it to him because I'd been throwing that ball for so many years that, so many hours in my childhood, that it was as easy for me to throw it to him as it would be to walk it over to him and put it in his hand. And that's sort of what you want to work toward with your painting. And so let me, I guess, try to demonstrate that a little bit here. Notice that we have a highlight that starts turning towards a midtone, that starts turning toward a shadow. And that is all you have to worry about, is looking for lights, midtones, get a little smaller brush, and darks. And if you can roughly just get in all your lights, midtones, and darks in kind of the right place with a little bit of fun in your brushwork, that's it. That's it. And I think for those people that kind of enjoy the style of painting that I enjoy, I kind of think of it like a beautiful mess. When everything is there but you can't really put your finger on it. And real quickly before I start just trying to find better words to describe what I'm talking about, sometimes you'll sample a color and you'll lay it down, it just doesn't read right. You got to trust your eye more than the sample. If you're doing color picking, you need to push the values a lot of times more than maybe the color picker can offer you. So I think that's just a really important tidbit is use the color picker if you want, but don't entirely trust it. It's an approximator. It's not going to give you the best value all the time. And so you've got to refine it. You've got to be the one to say, you know what, the color picker is telling me that, but I don't feel it. I need that to read as having more contrast, or I need that to read as having more color pop, or I need that to read as being more subtle. So, whatever you get from any automated tool, don't just trust it because, the computer says so. You have to make it feel, like it's working. And in the feeling that you're going for is really the feeling of a relationship, right? You're the relationship between one value and another, one color and another, one texture and another, one brush stroke and another. And so that's your goal. And another thing that I just want to talk about is you can very easily get away with using one brush for an entire painting, but to me it's a little bit I want more variation. There's enough repetition with brushstroke in a painting that I want more variation. And what I'm going to do for variation in Art Rage is I'm going to switch my tools around. I'll use the palette knife sometimes, and I'll use the oil brush, and then I'll use the custom brushes. And a lot of times, like, I'm playing with the point of capturing the energy and the life. Because as you know, like if I turn my layers back on and I showed you guys like my initial sketch versus now, well, now it's starting to look kind of like, well, it's looking kind of nice. Like it's all refined and there's naturalistic blending and it's looking good, right? but I don't really like it as much because it's kind of dull. It doesn't have that kind of like impact that the original sketch had. So it's a delicate dance where you can real easily overwork stuff. You know, there's the kind of like crazed brushwork that, you know, it's just barely hanging on to the surface. And then there's that super refined like photorealism, and there's this huge spectrum in between, and that we all fall into that spectrum somewhere. For me, while I can do this more polished look, it's not my interest as much. You know, I just don't find it to be that stimulating. I think it's cool. You know, when I see like a photorealist, you know, exhibit, I'll go like, wow, that's really awesome, like unbelievable, and it's fun to look at. But I don't want to make it. I'm not interested in it. So you just got to be you when it comes to painting. So let's see here. Just that little bit of like kind of chopping it up a little bit and making it a little more chunky, that feels better to me. I like that a lot more. So you can do what you want, of course. And that's the gift of this thing, is it's not like there's a better or worse. There are artists of every persuasion who have had massive success and have big fans and stuff. But again, I would not never think about success and fans and you know, all that stuff while you're painting. It's okay, you don't have to dream about that stuff after, but when you're painting, I think the key is you've got to keep it for you and about you. And it's not that it's like has to be selfish, but it has to be authentic. And I think that's the thing, is you have to be watchful that you don't let the creative process get muddied by the expectations that others have of your work. And that goes all the way. You know, when it comes to, oh well, this is more marketable, or this is more this is going to get more likes in social media, or you know, that kind of thing. I think you got to be really careful of that, because your art is your thing. You know, it's like it's yours, and it needs to stay yours. So if you like painting grandma's still lifes, or plein air paintings of cattle, or there's like, who cares? Whatever your thing is, that's your thing. Just do it. And you know, I think one of my struggles with that a lot is I grew up painting with my grandmother, and in a lot of workshops with these really established artists who would kind of travel around and teaching maybe retirees or new artists, or people looking to invigorate their career and their professional artists, whatever, just like kind of a bunch of different types of people there for different reasons, but they're all there to learn and to paint. And so I've learned painting in oil painting in workshops with these like really good artists, and I learned to like kind of dogmatically, like I was a kid, I was super impressionable, right? So I learned a way to paint. So when I pick up an oil brush or an oil paint, and I get my brush out, it's like, it's automatic. It's like that throwing the football thing. Like I know exactly what to do, how to do it, you know, the whole thing. And that's cool. But it was difficult. And this is to kind of make a larger point. It was difficult because when it came to subject matter, it was pressed upon me so early on that what you paint is Americana, what you paint is landscape, what you paint is the West. You know, that's where I grew up, was in the West. So you know, we paint that, and that's what painting is. Painting is this recording of realistic forms, and the subject matter it doesn't have to be, you know, ranchers and horses and stuff, but it's familiar to that. And there's, you know, there's something that is kind of all kind of familiar to that. And every gallery I went to and every gallery I was in and all that was like landscape, still life, and then, you know, the occasional expressive figure painting. And it was really hard for me to escape that. I learned that that's what painting was. So it wasn't until I picked up Art Rage that I found that I didn't always want to paint still life, or I didn't always care about painting landscape. I wanted to just do everything. And because I kind of skipped that whole adolescent journey in my art, you know, I did in my life, I didn't skip it in my life, but I did in my artwork. My artwork went straight to like the stuff you paint when you're done with corporate life and you want to just kind of meditate on the river and have your kind of your Taoist retreat, you know. And so I kind of had to do some backtracking, and I did that through digital. And that's where I would paint sci-fi and fantasy stuff. That's where I would let my that part of me that loved Frank Frazetta and you know, those like science fiction novel covers from the 70s and 80s, like that's where I let that part of me out. And then in instructionally and teaching, I did a ton of portraiture. So I was doing like sci-fi, fantasy, portraiture, Western landscapes, still life, and like that kind of like academic still life approach, you know, where you're doing real planar still life, all that stuff. I was doing all of it like all the time, and it became a little bit of a dilemma to me, because whereas most artists will kind of get known for a particular thing, I was not. I was doing, you know, figure drawing on Wednesday nights, and then nocturnes by headlamp in the downtown of like local eateries with their cool like windows in the summer with like people eating and having something to drink at the bar and stuff like. And then I would go up and plein air paint, and then I would go do these weird sci-fi illustrations that were, you know, exploring the concepts I was digging into when I was with my reading and stuff. And then I would, you know, I was just all over the place. And I started to feel like this strange guilt, like, well, my real art is my oil paintings. That like I need to, that's what I put in galleries, and this other stuff I just do for fun. And then something kind of special happened where I was like, wait a minute, I can do oil paintings of this science fiction fantasy stuff. Wait, I can do digital paintings of still life and whatever. And like it all just started to kind of cross-pollinate, and that was a good time. And that was a really important time, because I started to unhinge from that expectation that art looked a certain way, or that you had to do certain things. And what I was remembering is that, you know, you got to do what you're interested in, and the world is big and full of people, and you'll find your tribe, you know. But I think it's also difficult when you have so many interests that are genuine. You know, like some people, they like just one type of music, or they have a definitive favorite artist, or they have, you know, that kind of clarity there. I have definitive love and passion for art and painting, especially, like to a degree that's kind of insane, right? I can't handle life without it. Like I get really uncomfortable. But when it comes to subject matter and like the limits of what I want to paint, I'm all over the place, and I always kind of squirm when I have to nail that down. So just in this past year, you know, my goals are to do some summer art markets for my oil painting, but I also have a sponsorship to be at San Diego Comic-Con for my sci-fi stuff, and then I'll be doing like a portrait workshop, and then I'll post the random stuff on Instagram and do these YouTube tutorials in Art Rage, and then, it's just really all over the place. So depending on where you find my artwork or what platform I've been updating or forgetting to update, you might find a really different me. But I think the point is it's all okay. And there's not like a right or wrong thing. What you have to do is just be honest to yourself and let your work evolve moment to moment, day to day. And even when you're like online trying to figure out references and inspiration and stuff, you have to just let yourself be strange and goofy and just like, I mean, there was a period where I was saving like just these close-up shots of waves, just random, like no frame, just waves. Then there was another time where I was looking at a lot of like vintage motorcycle engines, and then another time I was looking at wedding dresses of all things, right? Like at that point I think Google thought I was definitely a female, but I was looking at all the embroidery and all the texture and stuff, and I just thought, wow, this is cool. And it was really I was something about it I was trying to figure out, right? And it all plays a role. So not just in your painting, but in your pursuit of references and inspiration, you just kind of have to let yourself be wherever you are. And I think that's a really freeing thing when you let yourself just think, well, I don't know why I want to look at this photographer's work right now, but I'm just going to look at it because that's what I'm interested in. And of course you want to always have integrity with your references and make sure you're crediting people if you're appropriating things and doing it in a way that's respecting the artist and stuff like that. I'm not saying just grab stuff and use it. I'm just saying let yourself be interested in wherever kind of like is tugging at you. And then when it comes to showing your work, don't even think about that for a long time. Think first and almost exclusively just about learning to paint and what you love to paint and what you're interested in looking at. And certainly, like, once you leave the studio, then you can kind of be reflective and evaluative and just say, why am I doing that? Like, why am I researching like all of these old cowboy images? That I was done with that, and then just, I think it's okay to do the why for sure, but don't do it while you're in the thick of it. When you're painting and you're doing some like Americana painting for whatever reason, you just do it. Just get into it, have a blast with it, do it, and then afterward you say, wow, I wonder what I'm interested in, why am I interested in that right now? And then you can maybe make some course corrections. But when you're in the studio, just live in the joy of just making the thing. And while I've been rambling, I'm kind of getting somewhere with this painting, so I wanted to just take a quick break and tell you, when I push the H button on the keyboard, what that does is it flips the canvas horizontally. When I push the V button on the keyboard, it flips the canvas vertically. Doing that, the two together are very helpful to me. I love being able to get kind of some fresh eyes while I'm painting, and that's for me a really easy way to do that. Now as I lay in some of the highlight colors on these feathers, notice how like I can leave it really raw and it reads really well. Like you don't have to really get in there and refine the heck out of everything. I do want to add some of those warm reflected lights into the shadow here. That's going to help those shadows read as a little bit more transparent, and the hair read as hair back there instead of it just kind of masking out into a black shadow, which is neither representative of what's happening nor realistic. So continue to really strive to look for color in your shadows. One of the things that you have to figure out, there's a little bit of like a control, nuance or sensitivity that you develop with digital, is you have to figure out how to combine the right kind of pressure and and tool settings to get the stroke you want for that. You know, and that's one of the things that's really more intuitive about traditional painting is you know how much to load up a brush with paint, and you know how to just like physically drag the brush in just a way to spin it, twist it, and let your pressure move in and out in the right way to get that stroke that you want, right? And to do the thing as one stroke. Well, it's a little harder obviously to do that with digital because you just do not have that same level of fine-tune control and that intuition about what the tool is going to do in your hand, because you know it's somebody wrote an algorithm that approximates what paint does when you push your brush into the canvas. Well, that's obviously, as good as Outrage is, it's still different than the real thing. So you kind of just gotta tinker a little bit, and you'll develop some favorite tools, you'll develop some favorite approaches, you'll develop some things that you know are your go-tos when you get a little lost in the painting, starting to get a little squirrely. So for now, I think this will be part 2, and I'm just going to leave it here for a moment, and I hope to see you guys again soon. Before I completely bail out, I think I might just put a little bit more of this splash back in there, and you'll see how effective it is at livening up some of these hot spots where we get a lot of I think it's the specular highlighting. I love how these little splats look so 3D. Outrage does such a good job with some of their custom brushes, and yeah, I feel pretty good about that. So let's go ahead and leave it there. And here's where it is now. This is the final painting, and you can see all I did was take what we were doing in the video and just kept pushing it along. I didn't record this whole section just because I only had little spurts through the day to kind of pick away at it, but there it is. Thank you so much for the long video, for watching this long video, and for checking out the work and hanging out. I hope you're having a great time with Outrage and with your digital painting. If you're interested, check out my Instagram or my Patreon, and join up, support in that way if you're interested. Thanks again. Take care, you guys. Happy painting.